Discover the amazing, touching journey of the Library of Alexandria, 3 surprising truths revealed. Jane Foster stood alone in the dimly lit storage room of the Maplewood Public Library, surrounded by the weight of history and the looming specter of uncertainty. The smell of aged paper surrounded her, a comforting reminder of the countless stories that had woven themselves into the fabric of her life. Yet today, as rain drummed insistently against the windows, she felt a cold knot of anxiety twist in her stomach. Budget cuts threatened not just her beloved library but the very essence of what it represented, an oasis of knowledge in a world that increasingly valued touchdowns over textbooks. As she rifled through boxes of forgotten treasures, notions of leaving this behind skittered through her mind, but the thought terrified her. Would a stable job offer any fulfillment? Weeks of being dismissed by a school board that saw books as expendable in favor of flashy sports teams bore down on her. She believed in education, in the transformative power of reading, yet her passion felt like a solitary flame in a fierce wind, flickering dangerously low. The stark contrast between her ideals and her reality produced an internal tug-of-war. Should she listen to her mother, who pushed her toward a conventional career, one that promised financial security? The echoes of her mother's words looped in her mind. "You need to think about the future, Jane. A steady job is more important than this pastime." Anger bubbled within her, momentarily overshadowing the despair that usually clouded her thoughts. What could be more valuable than fostering a love for literature in her students? Yet, did the community even care? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just then, Jane's hands brushed against something solid. With a sudden surge of curiosity, she pulled out an old trunk that belonged to her late grandfather, a historian devoted to uncovering wisdom from the past. Heart racing, she lifted the lid, revealing a trove of fragile manuscripts, their pages yellowed by time. Her fingers ached with anticipation, and as she uncovered each document, she felt a connection to her grandfather's relentless pursuit of knowledge. Amidst this historical revival, however, dark clouds loomed overhead, pressuring her to recognize the truth lurking beneath her exhilaration. What good would these discoveries do if they were buried in a library that might soon be forgotten? The tension tightened around her like a vice. Could her efforts really make a difference? How could she confront a school board that blatantly disregarded the significance of a library? With her dreams teetering on the edge, the realization struck her just as fiercely as the rain that beat incessantly against the glass. In this whirlwind of doubt and determination, one question consumed her: could she bridge the chasm between familial expectations and her unwavering commitment to education and community? The walls closed in, heavy with an impending sense of loss, and just then, the doorbell rang, echoing through the silence. A new chapter, a potential turning point, or perhaps, just another burden breaking on her already frail shoulders. Jane froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The doorbell's chime cut through the haze of uncertainty swirling around her. Whoever stood outside held the weight of possibility, another burden, or a chance to redefine her trajectory. With a deep breath, she steadied herself, feeling the cool, rough texture of the trunk she had just unearthed beneath her fingertips. She needed to confront her fears the same way she faced her work, with an unwavering commitment. As she moved to the door, she recalled the manuscripts now sprawled across the table, their legacy echoing the principles she cherished. With each slow step, a flicker of determination ignited within her. Surely, if she were to advocate for her library, it was time to confront her fears head-on. Everything she practiced and preached revolved around perseverance in the face of adversity. She swung open the door and found a young woman standing there, rain-soaked and wide-eyed, holding a clipboard. "Miss Foster?" she asked, her voice tinged with nervous excitement. "I'm Ava, from the Community Outreach Program. I heard about the cuts affecting your library and thought I might be able to help. Surprise momentarily stalled Jane's thoughts. A glimmer of hope welled within her. This unassuming stranger, soaked through with rain, could be a pivotal figure in guiding her mission. Come in, Jane invited, her voice steadier than she felt. As they settled at the kitchen table, Ava's vibrant enthusiasm sparked a new curiosity. Their conversation soon shifted to the community's perception of the library and its potential. Ava spoke passionately about events they could organize to raise awareness and funds to keep the library operational. Yet, Jane couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy creeping in. Do people really care? She interjected, her voice dropping in timbre. What if it's pointless? I've spent so long feeling unheard. Ava leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. We can't assume what people think until we ask them. It's about rallying the community to reflect on what they have before it's gone. Those words hung in the air like a thick fog, igniting a sense of urgency within Jane. She realized that fighting for her library meant inspiring those around her to recognize its value and potential as a beacon of knowledge. But could she truly wield influence over the school board, advocate effectively, and inspire change amidst her own doubt? Sitting with Ava, brainstorming ideas for workshops and fundraisers, Jane began to uncover the strength she had almost forgotten: her creativity, her ability to engage people. And what if this outreach meant more than money? Could it perhaps reignite her connection with the community she felt severed from? Later that evening, as rain continued to patter rhythmically against the window, Jane flipped through the yellowed manuscripts again, her heart now aflame with inspiration. If her grandfather had dedicated his life to preserving knowledge, shouldn't she harness her destiny to carry on that legacy? As she settled into her chair, she pulled out a blank notebook, allowing her ideas to flow and filling the page with plans, aspirations, and heartfelt intentions. For the first time in weeks, she felt the pull of purpose warm her soul. Yet, a tremor of confrontation lingered in the background. Could she confront the school board with her newly found resolve, bearing the burden of high expectations? The path ahead glimmered faintly in the storm. But she would need to fully commit to her quest, to plunge into the clashing worlds of tradition and modernity, dreams and practicalities. Just then, as her pen danced across the page, another thought seized her, a question she hadn't dared let bloom before now. What if she wasn't just defending the library, but herself? In a clash of ideals, could she carve a space where both could coexist? Her breath caught, both in fear and excitement. As the answer dawned upon her, she felt the first stirring of hope. The next step would not just be about the library. With personal stakes rising, Jane prepared for a confrontation she hadn't fully grasped before, one that would challenge her values, expose her vulnerabilities, and ultimately determine her path forward. The moment had come to face her critics, not just for the library, but for herself. The next morning brought a brittle silence, one that echoed Jane's own unease. She brewed her coffee mechanically, the scent swirling around her as she tried to summon the resolve she had felt last night. What had felt like a powerful surge of intent now seemed a daunting cliff, the bottom shrouded in fog. If she was going to confront the school board and advocate for her library, she needed more than just passion. She required an arsenal of facts, a strategy that could withstand scrutiny. She sifted through the materials she had accumulated over the years: library budgets, town surveys, program statistics. Each page felt like a piece of armor, readying her for the battle that lay ahead. Yet, lurking beneath her determination was a vein of doubt coiling tighter. Would the board even listen? Would they chuckle at her efforts to reclaim what they deemed obsolete? As she transformed her kitchen table into a makeshift war room, there was a flicker of her previous self, the Jane who had thrived on planning and disaster management. But this wasn't a natural disaster she could manage with checklists and contingency plans. It was a fight for something deeply personal. The library had been her sanctuary, a place where curiosity flourished. But had she ever considered the possibility that this fight was inherently about her worth, both inside the precincts of the library and out in the world at large? A knock on the door jolted her from her reverie. It was Ava again, bright-eyed and brandishing a stack of flyers. "I'm here to help," she said, determination radiating from her like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. Together, they worked on spreading awareness, drafting emails, and designing presentation slides that would illuminate the library's value. Ava's fresh ideas reignited Jane's own creativity, allowing her to navigate the delicate threads of community sentiment and administrative hesitations. What if I stepped up and asked the tough questions? Jane mused aloud. What is the school board's real agenda with these cuts? Ava leaned back, her eyebrows arching in intrigue. Now that's the spirit. You have to challenge their perception. Remember, it's as much about the library's survival as it is about reclaiming your narrative. What do you want your voice to represent? Jane sat back, processing Ava's words. This confrontation was not merely an external struggle, it was a manifestation of the internal battle she had waged for years. The moments in her life when she had felt dismissed or undervalued resurfaced with clarity. It was time to stop relinquishing her voice to accommodate others. I want to show them that a library is more than just books on shelves, she declared, her voice steady. It's a space for creativity, growth, and connection. And I need to articulate that with conviction. As they worked, Jane began drafting statements that echoed her resolve. Her fingers moved purposefully over the keyboard, creating a narrative that encompassed not just the library's statistics but the emotional tapestry woven through its history. With every line she wrote, Jane was building a bridge back to her community, pulling them in with stories that transformed data into human experiences. By the end of the day, not only had they created flyers and a presentation that could potentially sway opinions, but Jane also unearthed a deepened sense of identity. For the first time, she grasped that confronting the school board wasn't merely about institutional advocacy. It was about reclaiming her self-worth and the stories that shaped her journey. But in that uplifting momentum, a looming dread settled in. The upcoming board meeting would demand more than just her words. It would test her ability to remain unwavering as she unveiled her beliefs about the library's true impact. As Jane prepared for the night, she felt a mix of empowerment and fear. The time had arrived to set her aspirations against the backdrop of reality, a moment where she would either succeed in redefining both the library's and her own legacy or retreat once again into silence. Sweat trickled down her back as she stared at the prepared notes, now dripping with the weight of expectation. Would she maintain clarity when faced with opposition? This wasn't just a pivotal moment for the library. It was a defining moment for her. Taking a deep calming breath, she realized one truth: she had to be her own advocate, or risk losing everything she had fought for. Could she channel this newfound resolve against the disinterested board and reclaim not only the library but also her own voice in the process? The following morning dawned with a thick haze outside, mirroring Jane's muddled thoughts. Staring out at the overcast sky, she felt the weight of expectations pressing down, obscuring her vision. The hours until the board meeting slipped away, demanding every ounce of her focus. Today, everything depended on her readiness to confront the challenge ahead. Sitting at her desk, Jane gathered her materials once again, her fingers grazing over the meticulously organized presentation. They were more than papers. They were her lifeblood, embodying years of dedication and dreams. She felt the need to rehearse, to transform the facts from mere words into a vibrant narrative. Each point was crafted with intention, each statistic a building block toward the emotional bridge she wished to establish with the board. As she practiced, she watched herself in the reflection of the window, the weight of her past poised behind her. Who was she if the library's voice was silenced? All the memories of the students she had mentored, the countless programs that had thrived within the library's walls, surged forth, igniting an unquenchable fire within. Jane was not just a librarian, she was the beating heart of a community that found solace in stories. Stepping into her living room, she began pacing, the burn of her determination clashing with the familiar grip of anxiety. She recognized that this was not merely about saving a library, it was a chance to advocate for a version of herself that had been subdued for far too long. What memories of herself had she buried in order to comply with expectations? Anger surged, urging her to reclaim her narrative and confront any naysayer head-on. Her phone buzzed, drawing her attention to Ava's message. don't forget to breathe. You've got this. Jane smiled, her heart lightened by Ava's faith in her. She resolved to circle back to that feeling of unwavering support. It was essential to keep grounded in her mission, especially facing potential dismissals from the board. Arriving at the school, Jane felt a jolt of adrenaline rush through her. The familiarity of the hallways ignited a mix of nostalgia and determination. She noticed posters for upcoming relaxations in the budget, a stark contrast to the serious intent behind her own agenda. Were they aware of the discord brewing beneath their placid exterior? As she stepped into the board meeting room, the atmosphere was strikingly sterile. Wooden tables, lined seating, and the shuffling of papers defined the battlefield. The glances exchanged between board members told her they were accustomed to routine, shunning the unforeseen disturbances. In that moment, Jane felt the pall of judgment upon her, but she kept her head high. When it was finally her turn, she felt gravity pulling at her feet. With each word she spoke, Jane fought against the shadow of doubt. Sometimes she hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper, but she anchored herself in the narrative she had spent nights cultivating. She spoke of the library as a crucible of hope and opportunity, reminding them that her mission was not about nostalgia but about future growth and learning. Yet, as she articulated her vision, she saw skepticism threading its way through the board's countenance. Doubts crept in, gnawing at her confidence. What if they were older versions of herself, dismissing the validity of passion for value in statistics? She was not prepared for the dismissive remarks that began to emerge as they questioned the relevance of a library in a tech-driven era. In those moments, a moment of clarity struck her like a bolt of lightning. She needed to embody the message she presented, she could no longer allow outside forces to define her worth. Drawing from her reservoir of emotions, she presented an unfiltered version of her journey, the tears, the triumphs, the interconnected lives woven together through the fabric of the library. The board fell into an unexpected silence, absorbing her impassioned plea. As she concluded, a new wave of defiance pooled within her. This was only the beginning, she was done being swayed by uncertainty. Would they embrace her message, or would they revolt against the very essence of what she represented? As the meeting drew to a close, the chair looked at her carefully, a flicker of contemplation crossing his face. Jane's heart hammered with exhilaration. The fight wasn't over yet, and there remained a lingering question that needed answering. Would this moment be the reclamation she so desperately sought, or would it lead to an even greater confrontation within herself? She braced for the potential fallout of their responses that would reveal not just their position on the library, but on her very existence. The chair's gaze upon Jane lingered, simmering with tension. She could sense the divisions forming among board members, the clash of old-school pragmatism against her hopeful vision for the library's future. Each face reflected a spectrum of skepticism, but also a flicker of curiosity sparked by her heartfelt story. Silence filled the room, heavy and expectant, as they weighed the value of her words. As the chair finally broke the silence, his voice was steady but cautious. "Ms. Parker, you've certainly presented an impassioned case. However, we're not just here to listen to stories, we have a responsibility to ensure that our resources are allocated efficiently." His words, though punctuated with respect, stung as they reinforced the wall that separated her emotional appeal from tangible action. A knot of frustration twisted in Jane's stomach. Were they really unable to see the library's role as more than just a relic of the past? She fought against the urge to defend herself hurriedly. This moment demanded strategy, not desperation. As the remaining board members debated quietly among themselves, Jane took a step back mentally, weighing her options. Could truth alone win this fight? What if she redefined her approach? What if she strategically employed the hard data she knew they craved? Baptizing her fear with determination, Jane called upon her training. She would mesh her personal story with facts, using numbers and trends to fortify her vision. She quieted her racing mind, focusing intently on the goal. Her voice, despite the trembling in her hands, needed to resonate a sense of purpose rather than panic. "May I suggest we consider the potential ROI?" Jane addressed the board, heart pounding but voice steady. Studies show that libraries contribute substantively to community development. Every dollar invested often yields multiple returns in local economic growth and social engagement. The library isn't merely a place for books, it's a hub for innovation and skills development. Nodding heads began to emerge, though skepticism remained in the air, thick and tangible. Jane seized this moment, pulling from her well of knowledge and emotion. She rallied facts about literacy rates improving alongside library utilization, workshop turnouts, and community programs that had not just survived but thrived because of her leadership. She painted a larger picture, one that fused dreams with tangible achievements. Her conviction rose, cascading through the room like an unstoppable tide. However, a voice sliced through her fervor. "Jane, this all sounds impressive in theory, but we're faced with immediate financial constraints. At time we streamlined our priorities." Another member, with furrowed brows, challenged her directly, exposing the fragility of her position. Was she being naive? The doubt crept in again. Yet, Jane realized that this was as much a personal journey as it was professional. Every push against her vision mirrored her own internal conflicts. Was she going to allow herself to be edged out, or would she rise? Taking a deep breath, her heart brimming with resolve, she answered, "Are we to abandon a lifeline simply because it might require hard work? The library can be a powerful vessel for change, but it needs our will to invest and believe in it. I believe that transformation starts with a commitment to something greater than incremental savings." The room pulsated with tension, and Jane could feel the weight of their glances. A shift was undeniably occurring, but would it lead to acceptance or an insistent refusal? She looked into the eyes of her colleagues, confronting the apprehensive yet curious faces. As the board continued to deliberate her future within this unfolding conflict, Jane found herself reflecting deeply. She had spoken for herself, yes, but was there more to discover within her? Not only had she fought for the library's survival, but perhaps she was unearthing facets of her own character that she had long ignored. What else would this confrontation reveal about her resilience and worth? Across the room, the chair raised his hand for quiet, ready to announce a decision, and Jane tensed. Would the board support her vision, or would she face an unimaginable defeat, forcing her to truly confront the depths of her aspirations? The chair's hand hovered for a moment, silence thickening around Jane as she wrestled with the weight of uncertainty. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, their internal deliberations palpable to her, and she strained to decipher the nuances of their expressions. The moment bore the gravity of impending judgment, and Jane felt a flicker of resolve surge within her. This was more than a presentation, it was a pivotal moment of self-discovery. After careful consideration, the chair finally said, "We are prepared to support an initiative that prioritizes cost-cutting measures." His words felt like a heavy blow. The air rushed out of her lungs as a wave of disappointment washed over her. How could they turn away from possibility, opting instead for the path of least resistance? Yet, as she sat there, something deep within Jane began to shift. She could choose how to respond, how to channel her disappointment. It flickered in her mind a small flame of determination. Could her passion ignite change despite the board's reluctance? Instead of wallowing in the sting of rejection, she leaned into her internal dialogue, dissecting her emotions with an analytical eye. In that moment, the hesitance within her morphed into a wellspring of newfound tenacity. Could she influence their decision, even if not in this meeting? Jane's heart beat louder with each passing second, not out of fear, but out of the burgeoning realization. She held her narrative, her aspirations for the library, and her professional trajectory in her own hands. "Thank you for your feedback," she began, allowing her voice to work through the quiver of apprehension. "But I urge you to consider the implications of prioritizing short-term savings over long-term investment in our community's resources. We might be playing a dangerous game here." The board's expressions shifted from skepticism to intrigue, an opening she had to capitalize on. "What if I could provide a detailed plan that illustrates potential growth alongside budgetary prudence? I can prepare a proposal that aligns with both strategic cuts and innovative solutions to advance library programs." The chair nodded slowly, a glimmer of interest sparking in his eyes. Sensing an opportunity, Jane pressed forward. Imagine not just savings, but a reimagined library, serving as a technology hub and a community classroom, a true center for lifelong learning. Her mind raced, thoughts colliding together with urgency. The fire of challenge lit her spirit. This wasn't just about the library but also about proving her own capability. The flicker of determination escalated into an inferno. She allowed herself to visualize the library imbued with the vibrant potential. She envisioned a transformation she was becoming more than equipped to navigate. While they may have seen constraints, she began to see routes around obstacles. The perplexities of the boardroom shifted from intimidating barriers to challenges she could freshen with innovative solutions. Will you grant me 2 weeks to develop a comprehensive plan that speaks to these concerns? Jane continued, her voice steadying as confidence took root. We can still be stewards of fiscal responsibility while amplifying our mission. I am convinced we can have both growth and efficiency, a compelling combination. Heads nodded, and Jane's previous feelings of defeat began to dissolve in the warmth of renewed purpose. This moment had crystallized for her what leadership meant: not just pushing an agenda forward, but embracing vulnerability, developing resilience, and recalibrating strategies through collaboration and openness. The chair gestured for silence, capturing the board's attention, but Jane's thoughts spun wildly. She had catalyzed curiosity where skepticism had thrived. That spark made her wonder how far she could push herself beyond this moment. What new skills would she need to harness to ensure her success? The meeting drew to a close, and even as the final remarks echoed, Jane resolved to dig deep into herself. What had she yet to uncover about her own abilities and her capacity for influence? As the board dispersed, Jane knew she would face challenges ahead. These questions loomed larger now, and as she stepped back into her office, one fired-up wish beckoned. She was determined to transcend the expectations placed upon her and shape her own future. But at what cost would this ambition demand she rise? Sitting in her office, Jane stared at the blank page before her like a canvas awaiting inspiration. The board's approval was only a step. Now came the hard part, crafting a proposal that would persuade them to embrace her vision. She felt a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. The stakes felt higher than ever, not just for the library, but for her self-worth and ambition. She had taken the first step, but now she had to follow through with rigor. Jane's mind raced, ideas collided and coalesced into a vision that felt both urgent and transformative. She imagined the library not merely as a repository of books, but as a vibrant nexus of learning equipped with technology and programs designed to engage the community. However, to bring this vision to life, she needed a bulletproof plan. The first thing was to dissect each aspect of her proposal, breaking down goals into actionable steps. With a pen in hand, Jane drafted a detailed outline. The first section explored potential partnerships with local schools and universities, offering workshops that would enhance educational strategies. Next, she would propose technology training sessions for adults, desperately aiming to bridge the digital divide in her community. Each line of her outline ignited a flicker of excitement within her, but alongside it simmered the fear of inadequacy. Had she ever truly mastered the art of persuasion? Hours slipped by as Jane methodically filled the page. With each section, she grappled with self-doubt. Could she find collaborators willing to buy into her vision? Her previous experiences clashed with the belief that she was ready to take the lead. She recalled past meetings where she had faltered, hesitated, and allowed others' doubts to influence her voice. This wasn't just about crafting a proposal, it was also an expedition through her psyche. The sun dipped lower, casting shadows across her office. Jane took a moment to pause and reflect. She realized that this endeavor required not only intellectual rigor but also emotional resilience. The board had merely put her perspective to the test. The real challenge was to maintain that spark of conviction through the storm of potential criticism. As she continued to immerse herself in the plan, she began to notice her mind and body adjusting to the stakes. Where anxiety had once begun to dominate her thoughts, it transformed into an unexpected clarity. She set loose her fears, reframing them as motivators rather than impediments. This mindset opened new pathways in her thinking. Previously mundane ideas glimmered with potential as she infused more creativity into her proposal. Jane broke her focus to reflect on her personal growth. She saw how every experience could forge her identity not just as a library director, but as a leader. She knew she wasn't just fighting for approval from the board, she was fighting for respect and recognition of her capabilities. The reflection deepened as she gathered her materials for an upcoming meeting with potential collaborators. The ink in her pen ran dry, but she didn't stop. Jane reached for another, invigorated by her progress. With renewed zeal, she resolved that this proposal would showcase not just her plan but her evolution. She would step into a space of self-assuredness, commanding respect not through bravado, but authenticity and transparency. As she prepared for bed that night, the weight of her ambitions felt both exhilarating and daunting. Could she truly reshape their perception of the library and herself? The question looped through her mind, and sleep evaded her. Just as she began to drift into thoughts of success, an unsettling realization gripped her: her proposal needed more than flair. It needed evidence, data that could anchor her vision in the board's reality. She couldn't afford to just hope for the best, she needed a plan that would prove her assumptions right. As the day broke, the stakes felt different. Jane had to prepare for what could very well be the defining moment of her career. How far would she push her limits to bring her vision into the light? Little did she know, the hardest challenge awaited her just around the corner: the confrontation with a longtime critic unexpectedly arising to threaten everything she was building. Jane awoke to a gray morning that hung heavy with uncertainty. The clouds mirrored her internal weather, a tempest brewing just beneath the surface. As she sipped her coffee, her mind drifted to the proposal that would shape her future, each sip igniting a surge of determination. The mere fact that she had to confront a critic, someone she'd long regarded with a sense of dread, sent a shiver down her spine. This critic's opinions held weight, they were a test of her resolve. In her office, the walls felt closer as she spread her research across the table. Data floated like strands of smoke, elusive yet crucial. She populated charts and statistics around her narrative heart. How could she illustrate the need for these programs with convincing evidence? A thought twinkled: she could reach out to local educators and adults impacted by the library's current limitations to gather testimonials. Words from the community could speak volumes, solidifying her stance in personal yet powerful narratives. An hour slipped by as she drafted emails to prospective collaborators. There was a rush in her fingers, an adrenaline that came from not just advancing her proposal but redefining her authority. Who was Jane if not someone tenacious, willing to stand up against the harsh winds of skepticism? But with every message sent, self-doubt crept back in. What if they dismissed her request? What if they believed her vision too lofty? She shook off the disquiet and redirected her focus. Jane decided to create visual aids that would accompany her proposal: graphs that depicted community needs, images highlighting successful libraries that had embraced technology. Visuals could bridge the gap between abstraction and reality. She began sketching ideas for infographics, a way to create a narrative that even the harshest critic could understand. Mid-afternoon brought a moment of reflection. The weight of the upcoming meeting clawed at her senses, but she knew change could no longer be a mere concept, it had to take shape. It was time to confront how she communicated her vision. In previous meetings, she had often relied on humility, perhaps a bit too much. The truth was, she knew what was at stake. She was no longer only advocating for the library, she was championing capability, progress, and the future of learning. As the day moved forward, an email notification broke the silence. It was from her biggest critic, a member of the board whose resistance to change was well known. Instantly, bile rose in Jane's throat. The subject line spoke of concern over her proposal's feasibility. Her heart raced, feeling like she was teetering on an edge. Did she have the courage to respond with confidence, or would she retreat into defensiveness? With frantic fingers, she drafted a reply, spilling her heart as she conveyed the value of her vision. Rather than simply defending her ideas, she invited him to discuss his concerns, to find common ground. The act of extending the olive branch filled her with unexpected fortitude. In that moment, Jane recognized a significant shift. Her ability to influence conversations was not merely a matter of winning approval, but also of embracing dialogue. Days passed, and Jane traced a map through her spiraling emotions, preparing for the presentation that now loomed like a mountain. Her resolve transformed slowly into an internal declaration. She was ready to step out of the shadows of doubt and claim her rightful space as a leader. As she finalized the presentation, flashes of past hesitations and failures flickered through her memory, yet none could steal her fire now. But then, lurking in the back of her mind was a haunting question: would the board recognize the value of her newfound voice? If she were to withstand the pressures now bearing down on her career, she would need to confront not just her critic but the narrative she'd woven around her worth. What if everything met fierce resistance? Would she crumble, or discover resilience in the struggle? As the sun sank behind the horizon, casting an orange glow through her windows, a wave of anticipation washed over her. Tomorrow, she would present, and in that moment, she would redefine herself. Yet, the fear of rejection gnawed at the edges of her bravado. The hour of truth approached, but how would she leverage her growth in the face of overwhelming scrutiny? The night felt interminable, the quiet only broken by Jane's racing thoughts. The question that lingered: was she prepared not just to present to the board but to take on her own past vulnerabilities reapplied as strengths? That uncertainty loomed larger with the dawn of a new day, one that could unravel the carefully spun fabric of her aspirations. Tomorrow would reveal whether she could confront her fears, but a deeper fear stirred beneath her resolve. What if she succeeded only to realize that her journey hadn't truly begun yet? The morning arrived, bright and filled with possibility, but Jane's stomach churned at the thought of the day ahead. As she dressed, each movement felt ritualistic, a silent ode to resilience. The polished shoes she slipped on were not just footwear, they were a metaphorical armor for the anticipated battle of wills with the board members. The drive to work was a blur of colors. The world passed by as Jane's mind rehearsed her talking points, clinging to phrases that would assert her authority. Yet, within the steady beat of her heart, an underlying tremor of doubt persisted. She questioned whether these rehearsed words could withstand the scrutiny of her peers. Entering the library, the familiar scent of aged paper and polished wood enveloped her like a comforting embrace, but it served as a stark reminder of the traditions she was challenging. How could something so venerable adapt to a future she envisioned: the world of technology, innovation, and community engagement? This thought formed the crux of her proposal, but she had not only come to speak of change, she had come to ignite a conversation. As she stepped into the conference room, the board members were already seated, their faces a tableau of skepticism and indifference. Her eyes fell briefly on the critic who had loomed in her mind like a ghost, a figure that had often judged her capabilities with scrutiny. The well-worn chairs seemed to reflect the weight of their previous decisions, anchoring them in a moment of evolution that felt almost dangerously stagnant. Taking a deep breath, Jane positioned herself at the front, her visual aids glowing with promises of innovation. The first few moments tripped over her nerves. She stumbled over a few phrases, but she quickly regained her grip. With each slide she presented, the charts and images sparked a flicker of interest amongst the board members, and Jane rode that energy like a wave beneath her feet. She spoke about the testimonials she had gathered, voices of teachers and community members who expressed not just desire but a piercing need for the changes she proposed. Each story laid down a foundation of authenticity, allowing her to paint an image that transcended data. It created a narrative of shared human experience. Yet, as she moved deeper into her presentation, the critical member remained unmoved. Questions arose like clouds heavy with rain. One in particular cut straight to the heart of her ambitions. While these testimonials are compelling, how do we ensure that the funding will produce measurable results? A chill enveloped Jane, but instead of resisting, she chose to confront. That's an excellent question. The metrics from similar successful initiatives illustrate a direct correlation between investment in new technologies and improvement in learner engagement and community participation. Her voice rang with a conviction that startled even her. After her rebuttal, an internal shift occurred. No longer was she simply defending her proposal, she was engaging in a dialogue, moving toward mutual understanding. While there were still questions and doubts rotating around the table, what mattered was her application of insight learned from past meetings. She had seized the narrative of the conversation, establishing herself not just as a proponent of change, but as a leader willing to be challenged. As she concluded, Jane's heart raced, the board members exchanged glances, a familial rhythm of indecision. She could sense the shifting atmosphere, their rigid front began to yield, if only slightly. But even with this glimmer of hope, uncertainty gnawed at her. Had she done enough? The meeting wrapped, and as she gathered her materials, adrenaline fizzled into exhaustion. Despite a day filled with daunting questions, something vital ignited within her, a recognition of her own potential to sway thoughts, not just within the room, but in the community at large. She wasn't just advocating for a library program, she was advocating for growth. Exiting the room, Jane felt untethered yet liberated. Whatever the final verdict would be, it was clear her journey towards self-discovery hadn't just begun. It was blossoming into something profound, a realization that this was a pivotal moment in her assertion of agency. But amid the rising tides of hope, another reflection loomed: what if she had the power to change not just the board's opinion, but the very way they approached innovation moving forward? And what would that mean for her future endeavors? The thought sent a thrill through her. The contours of her professional destiny were slowly beginning to shift, yet the battle was far from over. The next meeting would surely demand more grit, and as Jane contemplated the potential path ahead, she braced herself once more for the tapestry of resistance and revelation that awaited her. The following days crystallized Jane's resolve. As she awaited the board's decision, a newfound confidence pulsed through her veins, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had once plagued her. No longer was she simply a hopeful librarian, she was a determined advocate ready to carve her own path while championing the library's mission. The journey that began as a fight for survival had transformed into the quest for innovation, empowerment, and personal growth. When the board reconvened to vote on her proposal, Jane stood at the helm of anticipation. The air was electric, buzzing with speculation. She had crafted her arguments with precision and passion, intertwining compassion with data showing that the library was not merely a building filled with books, but a dynamic entity capable of shaping futures. As the board chair announced the affirmative vote, elation coursed through her. The library would receive the funding to implement the new programs she had envisioned. Victory surged, but it felt different this time. Jane had not merely won the board's support, she had proved to herself that she could navigate the complex realm of institutional decision-making while asserting her voice with clarity and conviction. Her transformation did not end with that vote. Jane recognized that she was now not just a keeper of history but a catalyst for change. Armed with the board's endorsement, she wasted no time in rolling out community workshops, technology training sessions, and outreach programs that beckoned residents into the library's embrace. Each program garnered enthusiasm and interest, attendance swelling beyond her expectations. The library became a fulcrum of activity, a true hub for learning, engaging the community in ways that had once seemed impossible. With each event, Jane's confidence burgeoned. She discovered a knack for public speaking, for storytelling that inspired participation and dialogue. Feedback from community members poured in, each echoing the transformation she had wrought. What once felt like whispers of uncertainty within her was now replaced with a steady drum of purpose. Despite the personal growth spurred by her triumphs, Jane also nurtured her relationship with the board and her critics. Conversations that began as confrontational evolved into collaborative brainstorming sessions. Jane's tenacity earned her respect, and her steady, informed approach invited input rather than resistance. Yet, what she cherished most was not the accolades or the approval, it was the realization of her own capabilities. Jane had stepped into her authentic self, fostering not only her career but also deepening her connection with the community she had longed to inspire. She became a beacon of encouragement for her students, helping them recognize the impact of literature and knowledge in shaping their lives. Attending her first community fundraising event, Jane felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. Surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, she relished the buzz in the air as she shared the successes and future plans for the library. The applause that followed her presentation thundered with affirmation, echoing her journey from a reluctant advocate to a formidable leader. As Jane stepped away from the podium, her heart swelled with fulfilled aspirations. She had conquered her fears, carved out her destiny, and reclaimed not just the library, but her own narrative, a story woven through courage, resolve, and the unwavering belief that education held the power to change lives. With a solidified sense of purpose, Jane Foster emerged as a respected pillar in her community, a leader who demonstrated how one voice, driven by passion and conviction, could influence change and inspire others to find their own. Now, as she glanced at the library filled with patrons, students delving into new worlds and adults exploring unknown skills, a visceral sense of pride washed over her. This was just the beginning. She had proven that not only could she advocate for a cause, but she could also redefine herself amid challenges. The library stood strong, and so did she. Now is the time for you to join this journey of transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure others can witness Jane's incredible journey. Comment your reactions and theories about Jane's triumph, and what you would do in her shoes. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and be inspired. This is the moment to show your support and be part of a community that truly values powerful stories of personal overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to share.